Well, hello from the Aviva Stadium. Fairly kind of wet and miserable Aviva Stadium the day before Ireland play Italy in the Six Nations. We're just at their captain's run here. Cian, we know that Italy can fairly handle monsoon-like weather conditions, can't they, after the way they handle the weather in their game against Scotland last weekend. I don't know what's good weather going to be like for tomorrow.
I hope it's a bit drier than it is now, Sinead. It seems like every time you rock up to a game these days that it's just absolutely torrential. It was the same in Paris, obviously, last week. Ireland struggled to adapt to conditions. It was the same back in November as well. A lot of the games I remember were played in tough conditions as well. And I know we're obviously going to get on and talk about the Ireland team, but I think the pack in particular that Andy Farrell has picked, I think if it is a bit wet and it is a bit greasy, I think the size of the Irish pack, I think, will tell a lot about possibly what game plan Ireland will try and play.
Yeah, we'll get into the game plan in a moment. There's been a lot of gut checks done on Irish rugby, hasn't there, over the last week since that defeat to France. Where are you now, like 24 hours out from the game? Where are you on the scale of concern for Ireland?
Well, it's funny because when we were doing our post-match podcast last week in Paris, and when I'd written my match report, I was kind of wondering if I had been not too positive, but not as maybe completely negative as I think most people seem to have been. And I think now, as the week has gone on, I'm kind of happy enough with my immediate sense, because that is still my sense. I still think it's far too early to be pressing the panic button. I'm certainly going to be reserving judgment until after the Six Nations, unless of course Ireland were to lose here against Italy tomorrow, which I don't think will happen again. If they were to lose to Wales, if they were to lose to Scotland at home, but I'm not pressing the panic button as much as everyone else seems to be. My thoughts, if you remember last week, were that Ireland were missing a lot of players in France. They didn't play very well at all, and I thought the comeback that they showed to avoid a complete hammering, there were some positives in that, but I would fully expect a big response here tomorrow at the same time.
Yeah, so Andy Farrell has obviously made 6 changes from the side that started that defeat to France. Where, was this expected, do you think? I mean, people might say, of course he was going to have to make those changes, but he still went with them. So what's your reading of the overall team? Because I asked you in the Stade de France after the defeat last weekend, did Andy Farrell pick the wrong team? So I'm asking you now, before this one, has he picked the right team for this?
Well, I don't know if Andy Farrell was listening to our podcast. Probably not, in all likelihood. But I think we did shout out Robert Balakoon and Cormac Izuchuku as 2 guys who could come into the team this week. I think Cormac Izuchuku would have had a great chance, I think, to have been involved last week, only he came into camp with a toe injury, which is obviously fully healed now. Look, I described it earlier in the week, Sinead, in a piece that I did as Andy Farrell's most important selection. I got a bit of blowback because I think people misunderstood what I meant. I didn't mean this is the biggest game of Andy Farrell's career, but I thought he had an opportunity to send out a message to certain players who weren't playing well, to freshen up the team, and that's exactly what he did. And I know Ireland have often made changes for the Italy game, but I thought Farrell was really sort of forthright and strong in his press conference yesterday, and he said this isn't about rotation, this is about a reaction to last week and also giving guys an opportunity. So I'm very excited, I have to say, about the team that he's picked.
Yeah, and of course when there are a lot of changes in a team, we always talk about what about the issue of cohesion and what's that going to be like. But for those 2 guys there, for example, Robert Balakoon and Cormac Izuchuku, such exciting players coming into that starting team. But there is a jump there, isn't there? Obviously between URC, Challenge Cup into Six Nations, how do you think that they will be able to absorb that step up, even though we know obviously as well there's going to be a big responsibility on the more experienced players in this team?
Of course, they've been around the camp for a long time. I mean, Robert Balakoon isn't exactly a young kid on the block. I think he would have won a lot more caps, but just it's so many injuries. I think Cormac Izuchuku's a bit younger, not too much. He's not exactly a young kid either. He's taken the long route to get here, but they've both just been dogged by injuries. But you're right, they've been playing excellent rugby for Ulster. I think it's great that their form has been rewarded. Look, this is what Irish supporters have been crying out for the last couple of years, is that to see form rewarded. But now that they're in the team, they have to take their opportunity. Obviously, Tommy O'Brien and Jacob Stockdale are 2 of the players who paid a heavy price, completely bombed out of the 23 for, I think a lot of that was down to losing the aerial game. So again, it'll depend on the conditions that are here tomorrow. I think Italy will go to the air quite a bit. They were excellent in that regard last week against Scotland. You think of Tommaso Venicello's try at the catch that Louis Lina had, absolutely outstanding. So I'd imagine Italy will probably look to do a lot of that. Don't necessarily know if that plays into someone like Robert Balakoon's hands, who wants a fast track, he wants a dry track. I mean, you can obviously appreciate Sinead, a good runner. When that guy moves through the gears, and it's his ability to change direction when he's at full tilt is just an absolute joy to watch. So I think it's on Ireland to get him the ball in open space. But I think one of his big work-ons, and maybe why he hasn't quite fitted the mould of an Andy Farrell winger, is that, you know, the way he spoke about Matt Hansen, an untidy winger, coming in off his wing, making stuff happen, linking with other players. That maybe is something that didn't come as naturally for him, but I think he's gotten a lot better over the last couple of years, particularly playing under Mark Sexton now in Ulster. I think there's bit more of a freedom. He's got a good offloading game. I think a lot of those traits, I think you could say about Cormac Izuchuku as well. So I'm very excited to see how they go. Izuchuku has come through the sevens pathway. I think it's also worth mentioning their clubs. Robert Balogun, what a day for, you know, he has a few caps already, but for Enniskillen, you look at Cormac Izuchuku in terms of Tullamore, and we'll get on and talk about Edwin Adogbo. What a great day for Cove Pirates as well. So I think it's important to acknowledge the club pathways as well, because, you know, with all the doom and gloom that's been going around for the last week, Sinead, I think it's important to remember the importance of the club rugby, and I think that has maybe been sort of forgotten about in the last couple of years, because there's loads of gems out there. There's loads of gems. It's just about getting out there and trying to find them.
Yeah, and actually Andy Farr made sure to make reference to that in his press release yesterday about Cove Pirates as well, like for Adogbo. We'll get onto the bench in a moment. Let's just go back to that game plan. You touched on it there, and it's going to be great to see how those kind of X-factor players, and that bit of an unknown quantity that those guys will bring against Italy tomorrow. But there's been 3 dirty words hanging around Irish rugby the past week, and that's been lack of intent, the charge by Andy Farrell against that first half performance, in particular against France last weekend. So what are we going to see from Ireland tomorrow in terms of the game plan? Are we going to revert, or are they going to stick to that kicking strategy of which we saw a really poor return on the catches last weekend?
I think a lot of supporters are concerned that Ireland are going to go down the route that, you know, South Africa have and England have, and it's been very successful for them. And look, it can suit Ireland, I think, on certain days, but I think Ireland and Andy Farrell have been a little slow to the party, because they don't want to completely move away from what, you know, made them one of the best teams in the world. I can, but I think it's all about getting the right balance. When we were in Portugal the week before last, Andrew Goodman, the assistant coach, told us that Ireland want to become the best aerial team in the world. Well, that to me suggested that they had been working huge amount on that going into the game against Paris, but you'd be fooled for thinking otherwise, because they were just so poor in the air. And like I mentioned, the 2 wingers have paid the price. I also think Josh van der Fleer and Cian Prendergast have paid the price for what Andy Farrell described as losing the scraps on the ground. And if Ireland are going to play this aerial game, so I think Gibson Park, a lot of his kicking was actually quite good. It was just not enough aggression and hunger to want to get into that aerial contest. Really, really poor. So guys have paid the price for that. And like I said, the guys who've come in now, it's up to them to take the opportunity. So in terms of the game plan, I'd be surprised if Ireland play a similar game plan to what they played last week. I think they have to tailor it to the opposition, and they can't play sort of a containment game plan against Italy. They have to be on the front foot and take it to them. And that's why I mentioned the pack, Sinead, particularly the back 5 of the pack. That is a big dynamic back 5. James Ryan obviously being rewarded for his excellent impact, and Jack Conan as well. So those guys will bring plenty of impetus. I think Joe McCarthy will have a bit of a point to prove after the game passed them by, I think, last week, and obviously gave away that silly penalty. Izuchuku, who we've mentioned, and Caelan Doris is going to play at open side. I'm still unsure if that's the best way to go long term, but I don't think Caelan Doris has been at his very best at number 8, and maybe moving him into number 7 and giving something else to think about might bring out the best in him, because I do think Ireland have to find a way to get Jack Conan into the team, because when he's playing well, he's exceptional. Even though he has been a very good bench player for Ireland, I think again you have to reward the form. So I would imagine, to round that off, that Ireland will look to take the game to Italy up front. I think this Italy pack are far better than, in general, actually, this is probably, and Andy Farrell touched it, the best Italian team that's going to come to Dublin. But I would expect Ireland to really take the game to them up front and try and run over them up front, and then get the likes of your Balogun, your Jamie Osborne, James Lowe involved in the back line.
Yeah, the players have just started to come out there now. We'll get on to the Italy team in a moment, but look, this won't be a podcast or a video about Irish rugby unless you mention about the out half. So it's obviously Sam Prendergast in there at half back with Craig Casey. I think they started twice together before, Fiji in 24 and Georgia, was it, last summer when you were there? So, but this is going to be their biggest game starting together, the 2 right?
I guess that was another monsoon in Tbilisi that night. Just can't escape this bloody rain. I'm really excited, because I'm glad you had the stats actually, because I was trying to think how many games they started together, because normally, and not just in a Munster context, we normally see Jack Crowley and Craig Casey play together for Ireland, and I think Craig Casey deserves a start. Gibson Park didn't have his best game last week, but I don't think it's any harm to give him a rest anyway, along with Tyke Burns. I think Craig Casey is a real energy driver for this Ireland team, and he'll come in with a bit of a point to prove as well. Look, there's pressure on Stan Prendergast, of course there is. It didn't go all his own way last week. Obviously there was a couple of defensive issues, particularly off the Jalibert try, but he also had a couple of brain farts, for want of a better term, in terms of the volleying back and giving France a chance to counter-attack, throwing the hospital pass to Tommy O'Brien that eventually led to the try. He did some good stuff as well, a little front door pass in the build-up to Timney's try, I think it was.
Yeah.
So we all know what he's capable of, and again, I go back to the pack, Sinead. I think this is a pack that can get on top of Italy. Last week, the pack were completely dominated, and it's very hard for any, obviously, out half to bring control to proceedings. So I would expect a much better performance from Stan Prendergast tomorrow.
Yeah, and they're all coming out there now. I see Gary Keegan down there as well, and he's going to have to kind of work his magic, isn't he? And to make sure that the hangover from last week is not still in the players' minds coming into this game. We mentioned Italy. I mean, they're going to come here tomorrow and they're going to smell blood, aren't they? They don't have, this is not a happy hunting ground for them, and they've got a pretty bad record. I think they were nilled here, were they, 2 years ago? But obviously they had that win over Scotland last weekend. Now this is going to be the balance for them, because I heard that they were out on the pitch at least a good half an hour to 45 minutes after the game in that monsoon, celebrating with their family and friends. So they've got to manage that transition from the euphoria of that coming back down and coming back up for this game again. But where do you think they could hurt Ireland here tomorrow as well?
Well, if you look back at the Scotland game last week, and like you said, it was played in torrential conditions, but they played the conditions really smartly, which isn't something that you'd say about an Italian team. And I think Gonzalo Caseda has done an unbelievably good job. Now, he does have a brilliant crop of players, but he's getting the best out of them. The Italian line-out did a complete number on Scotland, and that went very well for Ireland last week. But Ty Byrne, who was calling the line-out, is now going to be on the bench. Cian Prendergast, that was one of his big strengths last week.
So James Ryan, would he call?
I would imagine James Ryan would be calling the line-out. So that is a bit of a shift now as well that Ireland are going to have to get right, because I don't think one good performance means that our worries about the line-out, which we've had over the last few years, are suddenly forgotten about. So that is a key area, I think, is the line and the scrum. I was just going to mention it. They caused Scotland problems, but more pertinently, they caused South Africa problems, which is something that John Fogarty, the Ireland scrum coach, was really keen to remind everyone earlier this week. Again, though, the scrum went really well last week. Like that was kind of why I wasn't too kind of negative that some of the set piece issues that we concerns that we had coming into the game didn't come to pass. Having Ty Farrell on the bench tomorrow is a huge boost. And I'm really pleased that Andy Farrell has given the likes of Jeremy Loughman, obviously Dan Sheehan and Thomas Clarkson another start together, because they did really well. I think, just as a side point to that, I think Michael Millen is very, very unlucky to...
What's going on there?
Yeah, and I see him out there running there, so he's not as if he's carrying an injury or anything, so I think that's pretty harsh. But they're obviously keen to have a look at Thomas Tuchel, as Lou said, but to lose out to a player who doesn't even play in that position regularly, I think will be a bitter pill for him to swallow, because he was excellent.
Yeah, and I see Edwin Adogbo out there as well. Of course, he's on the bench. Will make his Ireland debut off the bench tomorrow. As you mentioned, Ty Furlong is on that bench. He's gone for a 6-2 split again. Keane, looking at the benches, do Ireland have the stronger one over Italy?
I think Ireland do have a good bench. I think it's been interesting to see them move to the 6-2 direction. I know they've done it in the past, but I think a lot of that is down to the fact that Bundyaki is suspended and Robbie Henshaw is out injured, because usually Andy Farrell has preferred to have a big centre as 23. And again, the 6-2 I think plays into the game plan that I imagine that they will, in trying to run over Italy up front. And I can't wait to see how Edwin Adogbo goes. I know you had a really nice piece on him, Sinead, talking to some people down in Cove. I don't know if you saw the picture that was up in the castle. Really amazing. That goes back to what I mean. Brilliant for the club. No, there was Kevin O'Keefe, you were speaking from Cove, who said, guys are looking up to Edwin Adogbo now.
Sean.
And Sean, of course, they had a really nice presentation, I believe, in the team hotel last night with the family. I don't think it'll be long before, by the way, Sean Adogbo is going to be here as well in the next couple of years, because the way he's been breaking onto the scene at Munster. So I think it's a powerful bench as well. Like I said, having Ty Furlong on the bench, obviously Ronan Kelleher as well. So I would fully expect Ireland to bring a big response.
And Jack Crowley again, I look forward to see him coming on and just seeing that dynamic again, because some people would have said that, Jack Crowley and Sam Prendergast should start in the same team.
Yeah, I didn't see that as a runner, to be honest, because Andy Farrell was asked about that afterwards last week, in terms of, did you feel Ireland looked better in attack when Jack Crowley was at fullback and that second pair of hands? Because I think even wasn't it Jack Crowley was that first receiver for that little pass that Prendergast gave. But he was kind of a bit cold on it. He wasn't too he wasn't buying into that notion And I think again, with lack of options at full back, I think it makes sense to give Jamie Osborne another opportunity. But Crowley was very good off the bench last week.
I would have started him. I had him in my.
I did too. Well, I would have had him at 10, but I don't think he's been tearing up trees this season, and that's part of the problem, that he probably hasn't put enough pressure on Sam Prendergast. But look, I would expect him to get 20-25 minutes. It just depends on where he's going to fit in, but he's a very important player in the bench because of his versatility. I know it's something it's not a role he probably wants to be filling, but the fact he can cover 10, 12, 15, he'll probably cover scrum half, I'd say, if you were really stuck, is really valuable. But he needs to be careful that he doesn't kind of become this jack of all trades, the Kieran Frawley or the Jimmy O'Brien that we've seen over the last years. Obviously, completely different in Munster. He is Munster's main number 10, but I think in an Irish context, he still has eyes on getting that number 10 shirt.
So I was listening to a podcast on the way over here, and presenter, well-respected presenter, tipped Italy to win tomorrow. So what do we had to give in our...
Was the presenter English?
Yes.
Okay, because there's a lot of people hoping to see Ireland fail here tomorrow. There seems to be a narrative building in England that they're on course, for a Grand Slam showdown for Italy. I'm still sticking to my assertion that if Ireland get a confidence boost and win here tomorrow, they could catch England cold, because I just think that people are writing them off way too quickly. And I'm not saying that they don't have problems, but I think this is a good opportunity tomorrow to just get a bit of, settle things down, reassert themselves, get a good win, and then who knows what will happen in Twickenham.
Okay, great stuff, Cian. Thanks a million for that. And of course, you can follow all the build-up with the Irish Independent.